Welcome to Liberate Your People Pleaser. I am your host, Brenda Florida, certified life coach, and you might be a people pleaser if you sacrifice your needs or your wants or your feelings to benefit someone else, or you keep silent when something bothers you or upsets you, or you're super critical and feel like you're probably your own worst enemy. Well, here's what I've got in store for you for this podcast. First of all, there's nothing wrong with you and you don't need fixing. What we need to do is leverage the superpowers of being a people pleaser, because there are definite superpowers. You are super intuitive, I am sure. You have great powers of empathy, the ability to read a situation and know what's going on with people and those around you. So what we're going to do in each episode is talk about ways to disempower the parts of it that are diminishing and don't serve us anymore, and level up or empower all those superpowers. So join me in the next episode of Liberate Your People Pleaser. Taking big leaps. Well, if you listened to last week's podcast, you heard my story, two of them actually, about some big leaps I took in my life that really turned out incredibly wonderfully for me and my family, and financially and professionally, and all these wonderful things. It's all the great stories that we always want to hear. And so I thought it only fair that today I share with you a big leap I took where I pretty much fell flat on my face. Because, you know, for everyone who has big leap stories, we usually have some of those big leaps and fall flat on our face stories too. You know, I always like to remind myself that there was those 2 years that Eckhart Tolle sat sitting on a park bench after he had his enlightenment experience before he wrote his now book, whatever, I just forgot the name of it. The Power of Now. There we go. And he spends like 3 sentences in the book talking about that. I'm like, okay, I think I'd like to know a little more. You know, he says he lost his, work and relationships and sat on a park bench for 2 years. That's about that. Okay. So I'm really curious about that. We've got, people like Nelson Mandela, my goodness, who spent, 26 years or whatever it was in prison. So many really outstanding leaders, really, historically transformational people also had really, really difficult times in their lives. One of my favorite people I follow is Byron Katie. I mentioned her, I think, a couple episodes ago, and she had an enlightenment experience of her own. But before that, she was suicidal, and she was living in a halfway house, sleeping on the floor. So I sort of have this idea about big leaps where I do go into a big leap anticipating a positive result, right? I get my plans in place. I, do my things. I'm not sitting around on the couch waiting for a check to come to my mailbox or somebody to call me because they want me to work for them or something like that. Like, that's not my style. I'm a doer. I'm a Capricorn. So I'm happy to do all the things. And I'm pretty comfortable with risk. Some of my friends are probably laughing hysterically right now. To some people, I'm extremely comfortable with risk. So you may not be like me. That's okay. Wherever you are, whatever big feels like you, that's your big leap, right? Whether it seems big to somebody else or not makes no difference whatsoever. But today we're going to talk about this. What do we do after we've had a big leap that hasn't turned out very well? The big leap where we fell flat on our faces. And so I wanted to get this episode out today because actually, if you're listening to this on the day it comes out, I have just arrived in Southern California, where I left a year ago after going 2 years ago, thinking I was going to move there. So I take this big leap. My business is brand new, but I'm super confident. everything's gonna, be fine. I'm gonna have the money to support myself. I'm a good business person. I've studied with really good online, entrepreneur type, people and masterminds and stuff like that. So I've got really solid business practices in my coaching business and da 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 da. So I take this leap, I go to California, and honest to goodness, the total opposite of that expression that everything they touch turns to gold. Everything I touched turned to, poop. And things that I expected to go beautifully went really poorly. People who were going to hire me and pay me a lot of money hired me and didn't pay me a lot of money, like just nothing. I'm not blaming them at all, but just like, it didn't happen the way they intended to, right? No malintent on their part either. It just didn't work out, as happens in all businesses. But I just had one after the other after the other. Well, I'm far enough and deep enough along in my spiritual journey that I knew this was an initiation. I knew that I had just embarked on a hero's journey and I was in the thick of it. Okay. I wanted a nice little, boat ride around the lovely beach where there would be cocktails waiting for me when I got done, enjoying the sun and being on the water. And instead I'm in shark infested waters. I don't know, like it was just not the trip I had planned on. So things just kept getting worse and worse, but I kept thinking, not 100%, okay? Sometimes I was crying. Sometimes I was lying awake at night, calling my friends because I felt so desperate. And I mean, it really also was the most despairing time of my life at times, but that's another podcast. Today, we're going to talk about recovering from it, because part of what kept me going was this question, what's seeking to emerge? Now, I borrow that question from Michael Bernard Beckwith, who uses it a lot. He uses it in a program that he has called Life Visioning, which I love, very good program. And one of the things he mentions that, is very obvious to us when we're not in the throes of a difficult situation, is that when we're in one, we tend to ask questions that are very disempowering. Why is this happening to me? When's it going to end? How come things never work out? What's wrong with me? What have I done wrong? Feelings of or thoughts of, I'm not good enough. I'm just not smart enough. I must not be connected enough. All these negative tirade of thoughts that will come through to us. And none of the answers to any of those are good, right? Like there's no good question to why is this happening? When is it going to be over? Because no one knows, And so an empowering question is, what is seeking to emerge? So as I'm in this situation where thing after thing I touch turns to poop instead of gold, what is seeking to emerge? What's here for me? I have said for years, and believed it all my life, even though I didn't always say it this way, that life is happening for me, not to me. So if life is happening for me, that means when it's really shitty, it has to be happening for me then too, not just when I get the unexpected 6-figure job opportunity, right? So I just kept going back to that question. And yes, I had my days or hours of despair. And then I would get back to that question and be like, no, wait a minute. This is all happening for me. And so if it's happening for me, what's in it, for me? What's the gold nugget? What's maybe the lesson? And it's not always a lesson. One of my very dearest friends, and one day when I called her so frustrated and so upset, and I was like, I just want to know what the lesson is. If I could just learn the lesson, that's going to make everything magically be okay. And she said, honey, maybe there's no lesson. I was like, wait, what? No lesson? So, because a lesson, sometimes we're going through things to upgrade our own operating system, so to speak, if you want to use a technology metaphor. It doesn't mean there aren't always upgrades to get bugs out. Sometimes it's just a better technology that's replacing an old one. And let me tell you, in the last 2 years since that leap began, I have replaced a lot of what I know now to be outdated technology that was in me in the form of limiting beliefs and all kinds of thoughts and habits that I had formed, some of which I really thought I had kind of, done away with, so to speak, through therapy and stuff. And because of the intense, and I did, so I don't want to minimize that work, but because of the intensity of this particular initiation, I found parts where it still existed, these ideas from my sort of fundamentalist Christian upbringing of a lot of condemnation and a lot of punishment. And so I found that question, what's seeking to emerge, would at least get me to a point where the answers that came were at least felt empowering to me. It at least brought me to a place of hope or a place of possibility instead of a self-condemning cycle, the sort of, why is this happening? What's wrong with me? The way those questions do. So I'm bringing this up today because, as I said, on the day that this podcast publishes, October 18th, I will have landed back in Southern California again to continue with this dream and hope to stay in Southern California to live. And if not, I will continue living, what I call location independent. So I haven't had my own place for 2 years. I've had most of my things are in storage. I have a small amount of things, my most precious to me things for a daily life kind of thing, are with me in my car. But I drive a convertible Mustang, so it doesn't make room for a whole lot of belongings. So clothes, few good coffee cups, my little bar set. I can 10 bar anywhere. I got my shaker, I got my glasses. I'm ready for that, and books, and my things I need for my business, my ring light that occasionally reflects in my eyeglasses here, so I have figured out in these 2 years how to set up shop anywhere I am, whether I'm there for a few days or a few months or whatever it turns out to be. And that's been kind of a cool thing to realize I can do too. And it is sort of fun to think, what, I could just, decide to hop in the car, as I decided back in July. I found this great Airbnb 15 minutes from the beach. The price was great. It's beautiful inside, all the things. And it's in, Southern California. So I thought, okay, I'm going to get in my car and go to California and stay until the end of January, at least, in this beautiful Airbnb. And I can do that. And I love the freedom of doing that. So do I miss having my own place sometimes? Absolutely. Some days I think I would chew off my, right arm. I'm left-handed, so I'll chew off my right arm. To have my things back out of my, storage container and have a place of my own that I know I'm going to stay in for a few years, that just seems like the best. And at the same time, it's obviously not what is in store for me right now. And so I keep asking that question, what is seeking to emerge? So I'm curious for you, whether you're in the moment now, it could be that the pandemic has thrust you into a big leap that you had no intention of taking until it happened. Or, maybe like me, you've chosen to take a big leap, or maybe you can look back on something in your life where you did that and you realize in hindsight how many gifts were inside of those, difficulties, those initiations that you were in. And if you're in it now, to be asking yourself, what's seeking to emerge? And I'm wondering what comes up for you. So I can't wait to hear whether it's something in your past that you can look at and say, oh yeah, that's, here's what emerged because of that initiation, or something you're in right now. Tell me all about it. And as I get myself unpacked and settled in sunny Southern California, I will have so much joy as I read your comments. And as always, feel free to email me your story or ask a question that you want me to address here on the podcast by emailing Brenda at brendaflorida.com. I love you guys. Here's to all of our leaps. All right. Thank you for joining me for this episode of Liberate Your People Pleaser. Hey, I've got 3 more things for you. One is join my private Facebook group, Liberate Your People Pleaser. We have lots of great conversations. I do Facebook Lives in there, drop in free resources, all kinds of cool things to support you in your journey to liberate your people pleaser. So the link for that is in the show notes. Second, I would love it if you would put a 5-star review on whatever podcast service that you found the podcast on. That would be totally awesome, and I'll give you a shout out on a future episode. And last but not least, if you've got a question you would like for me to answer or address, you'll also find a link in the show notes to do that. So submit your question and you'll hear me talk about it on a future episode of Liberate Your People Pleaser. I'll see you in the next episode, everyone. Bye-bye.